"Leave the dead to their light, my king." My oldest captain said it the way a man throws a stone into a well, expecting no answer, only the long fall of silence after. Behind him the lake lay black and unmoving, and out on its heart the dome stood as it had stood for 30 years. A hill of pale fire, a great sealed thing of frozen light, taller than my hall and rounder than the moon it seemed to have swallowed. I did not answer him. I never did, and he had followed me to the shore too many nights to expect it. "3 kings tried it before you," Cale went on, quieter now because he was not a cruel man, only a tired one. "Fire off the north wall. Siege hammers dragged across the ice in winter. Old Mother Sorn's whole coven, chanting 9 nights until 2 of them died of it. The glass didn't so much as fog." He drew his cloak tighter. "There's nothing living in there, Vale. There can't be. Whatever the regent sealed, he sealed it clean. Let the light keep it. Come inside. The council is waiting, and you've a kingdom that needs a king with both feet in the world." I heard him. I want that understood. I was not a young fool chasing a story. I was the Alpha King of Silvareth, and I had earned that name the hard way, pack by broken pack, treaty by treaty, until the 6 warring holds of the Lake Country answered to one horn instead of 6. I had buried a father who died fighting his own brothers. I had knelt on the ice and stitched the packs together with my own 2 hands, when everyone told me the Lake Country would only ever be a graveyard of rival wolves. I was 38 years old, and I had never once in my life believed in a thing I could not touch. And yet I had come to this shore every night for a year. "Go warm yourself," I told Cale. "I'll follow." He knew I was lying. He went anyway. That was the mercy in Cale. He let a man have his madness in private. When his torch had gone up the path and the dark came back around me, I walked out onto the ice. It was late autumn and the lake had only just begun to close over. The ice near the shore was old enough to hold a wolf. Further out it thinned to a skin, and further still, around the island where the dome stood, it never froze at all. The light kept the water warm there, they said, though no one had rowed close enough in 30 years to swear to it. I did not need a boat. I had learned the safe seams of the ice the way I learned everything, by walking them until my feet knew the truth my counsel would not tell me. The dome threw no heat that a hand could feel, but the closer I came, the more the black water opened around the island in a ring, steaming faintly, as if the light breathed. I stopped at the edge of the open water, on the last tongue of ice, and I looked at the thing I had come to look at. Up close it was not a wall. It was a skin of light, moving slow rivers of silver sliding up and over a curve you could not find the top of, folding into one another, parting, closing, the way the surface of the lake moves under a wind you cannot feel. It was beautiful in the way a drawn blade is beautiful. It did not want you near it. Every man who had ever stood where I stood had felt that, the way the light seemed to lean away from a hand, to close its ranks, and every man had turned back and told himself it was a tomb. I set my palm against it. I had done this 100 times. I did it because the first night I did it, something in me had gone quiet, not afraid, not warned off, but quiet, the way a room goes quiet when the one person you have been waiting for finally walks in. I had never told Cale that. I had never told anyone. A king does not say to his war council, "I press my hand to the sealed light because when I do, I feel less alone than I have felt in my whole life." They would have called it grief. My father was 3 years dead, and they were always watching me for the shape grief might take. So I told no one, and I came alone, and I pressed my hand to the cold, and I waited for the quiet. That night the quiet came, and then, under my palm, the light warmed. I want to be exact about this because I have told it many times since, and I have watched grown wolves weep at the telling, and I will not gild it. The war did not blaze. It did not thunder. Under my hand, in a circle no wider than my spread fingers, the cold light simply warmed, the way a bell warms when it has just been struck, though you did not hear it ring, and in that warmth my own blood answered. I felt it move up my arm and settle behind my ribs and take root there. in a place I did not know I had kept empty, and I understood, standing on the last ice of a lake in the dark, that I had been walking toward this cold light my whole life without ever being told its name. And then a hand pressed the light from the other side and laid itself flat against mine. I did not move. I have faced a charging bore line without moving. I have stood in a burning hall and given orders. But I will tell you honestly that when that hand met mine through the ward, I forgot every discipline I owned, and I nearly went to my knees on the ice. It was small against my palm. The fingers spread to find the shape of my fingers. Through the thin, warming skin of light I could feel the press of it, and faint, impossible, the warmth of a living palm and the smallest tremor in it, as of someone who has held very still for a very long time and is only now allowing themselves to shake. "You feel it too," I said. My voice came out wrong, cracked open. There's someone in there." The light between our hands went from silver to gold. It ran. From the place our palms met it spread out along the curve of the dome in a widening ring of warm gold, chasing the silver back, and where the gold went, the skin of the ward thinned like breath fogging off a window and clearing. And through it, for the first time in 30 years, a face looked out at the world. I have been asked since what I saw first. They want me to say her beauty. She is beautiful. I will not pretend a king is blind. But that is not what struck me, and it would be a lie to say so. What struck me was that she was awake. 30 years, they had told me. 30 years the dome had stood, and every soul in Silvareth had grieved or forgotten or feared whatever slept inside it. And here was a woman with her hand against mine, and her eyes open and fixed on my face, alive, present, seeing me, not the dazed look of a thing woken from long sleep, but the sharp, disbelieving, hungry look of someone who has been awake the entire time. Awake and watching the shore. Awake and waiting. "You can see me," she said. Her voice came through the gold-warmed ward muffled, as if through water, but I heard it, and the sound of it did something to the root that had taken hold behind my ribs. It pulled, once hard, like a hand closing. "You can, after all this time, you can actually." She stopped. She pressed her forehead to the light beside our hands, and I saw her shoulders move, and I understood she was fighting not to weep and losing. "I can see you," I said. "I can hear you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "They can never see me." The words came in a rush now, low and fast, as if she had been rehearsing them to an empty shore for 3 decades and was terrified of the one chance to say them aloud. "I stand right here. I press my hand to this exact place every single night. I have watched men come to the edge of the ice and put their hands where your hand is, and I have screamed at them. I have hit the light until my hands bled, and they feel nothing. They see a wall. They turn around and they go home. I have watched an old woman try to break it with fire, and I stood on this side and begged her not to leave, and she left. 30 years. Her breath shuddered. You're the first thing that ever pressed back. What's your name? It was not the kingly question. It was not the question a war council would have wanted. It was the only question in me. She lifted her head. Through the thinned light I could see her fully now, a woman near my own age, though something about the ceiling had kept the years soft on her. Dark hair loose to her waist, a plain gray gown gone silver pale with 3 decades of standing in light, and eyes the exact color of the moon on black water, which is to say no color a man has a name for. She looked at me as if she were memorizing me against the moment the world took me away again. "Nuries," she said. The root behind my ribs pulled a second time harder, and I heard my own wolf answer it from somewhere deep in me. Not the wild surge I had felt in battle, not the hunter's rise, but a low, settling certainty, the way the whole lake seems to sigh and settle when the ice finally closes for the winter and the water beneath goes still and safe. There, it said. There. That one. Her. And I, who had never in my life believed a thing I could not touch, believed the ward and the warmth and the pull and the name, all at once and without a single doubt, because I could touch her hand, and it was the truest thing I had ever felt. "Nuries," I said, just to say it, just to give it back to her, spoken aloud in the world for the first time in 30 years. I'm Vale. I'm the Alpha King of this country now. There's been a king before me, and one before him, and one before that, and every one of them stood where I'm standing, and not one of them heard you. I know, she said. I watched them all, a terrible flatness under the words. The one before you was old and sad, and he stood a long time. The one before him burned the north wall for a week. I thought he might do it. I was so sure he'd do it. She laughed, and it was a dreadful sound, the laugh of someone protecting a wound. He got a headache from the smoke and went home. They couldn't hear you, I said, because the ward was built to keep them out. It was built to keep everyone out. Everyone but you, she whispered. Everyone but me, I agreed, though I did not yet understand why, and the not understanding was already turning in me toward a colder shape. Because I am a king, and I had ruled long enough to know that no craftsman builds a lock without a key, and no regent seals a woman in 30 years of light out of mercy. I had grown up on the story every child of Silvareth had. The moon-cursed girl. The danger the good Regent Halloran had sealed away in light before it could bring ruin on us all at great cost to himself. May the moon keep his name. There was a stone in the market square with his name cut into it, thanking him for our safety. I looked at Nuri's, at the plain gray gown, at the hands that had bled against light begging an old woman not to leave, at the eyes that had watched 30 years of shore, and the story I had been raised on cracked down the middle like river ice under a warm foot. Nuri's, I said carefully, what did you do? She went still. It was the first time since our hands had met that she had gone truly still, and I felt the withdrawal in it before she spoke, the flinch of someone who has heard that question in a certain tone before and knows what usually follows it. That's the question they always ask, she said. In the story, what did she do, as if the light is the answer to a crime? She pressed her hand harder against mine, as if to hold me there through what she had to say. Do you want the story, King Vale? Or do you want the truth? Because they aren't the same, and once you've heard the truth you can't put it back, and you're going to have to walk back across that ice and live in a kingdom that's built on the story. The gold light held steady around our two hands. The black water breathed and steamed around the island. Somewhere far up the path, Cale's torch had reached my hall, and behind me the whole of Silvareth slept easy under 30 years of a lie I could feel. Now, the way you feel a floor is rotten a half-second before it gives. I want the truth, I said. Tell me everything. I have all night, and I am not leaving this ice until I understand what my kingdom did to you. She told me, and I will tell you, and I ask you to hold in your mind that every word of it came to me through a skin of living light, from the mouth of a woman who had waited 30 years for one person to press back. She had been 18. That was the first thing that undid me. She had been young, barely more than a girl, when they took the years from her. She had been born to the old moon line of Silvareth, the line the 6 packs had once revered before they fell to warring, a line, she said, that carried the light. Not fire, not the pale witch fire that old Mother Sorn's coven made. Moonlight, the true kind, the kind that falls on black water and makes it bearable to be alive on a cold night. The old wards of the lake country ran on it. The stone circles that kept the winter beasts off the villages, the warm springs the elders were born beside, the boundary lights that let 6 packs share one lake without tearing each other apart. All of it, she said, had once been fed by the moon line, girl after girl, freely, a gift given because a gift given is what makes a country, and not just a coast full of wolves. I could sing it out of myself, she said, and there was no boast in it, only a great and quiet grief. That's the plainest way I can say it. I could stand in the dark and open my mouth and the light would come, and I could put it into the old stones, and the wards would hold another year, and the winter beasts would keep their distance, and the packs would not go to war because the boundary lights were bright and honest, and no one could cross them in the dark and lie about it. That was what I was for. That was the whole of what I was for, and I loved it. I would have done it every night of my life. Then why? Because a man worked out that if he could keep the light instead of letting me give it, he could keep everything. Her jaw set, and for the first time I saw the steel the light had never bent out of her. My father's brother, Halloran. He was regent while my father was dying. The sickness took him slow, and there was a year where Halloran ran the holds in his name. And in that year Halloran understood something none of the good, tired men before him had ever bothered to understand. He understood that the moonline's light was power, and that I gave it away for free, and that a man who controlled the light controlled the wards, and a man who controlled the wards controlled every village that needed keeping and every pack that needed the boundary lights honest. He didn't want me to give the light. He wanted to hold it, and you cannot hold running water in your fist. She looked at me steadily through the gold. So he built a cistern. He built a thing that would take the light out of me and keep it, and give it back to the country a drop at a time, on his terms in his name, so that every warm spring and every bright ward and every winter the beast stayed away would be a thing the people thanked him for. He built the dome. The cold I had felt turning in me finished its turn and sat like a stone. The dome isn't a prison, I said slowly. It's a cistern, she said. I'm the well at the bottom of it. For 30 years, everything you love about this country, the warm springs, the bright wards, the peace between the 6 packs, the fact that a child can walk between 2 villages at night and not be taken, all of it has been my light, drawn out of me a drop at a time and handed back to you in Halloran's name. You didn't unite the 6 packs, King Vale. She said it gently, which was worse. Forgive me. You are the first king in 30 years I have wanted to be kind to, and I am about to be unkind, so please understand I say it kindly. The boundary lights held while you did your work because I held them. The peace you stitched together held because the winter beast stayed off the villages, and the winter beast stayed off the villages because of the wards, and the wards ran on me. You did great and hard and honest work, but you did it on a foundation that was a woman sealed in light, and you never knew, because the whole point of the dome was that you would never know. I stood on the ice with my hand against my fated mate's hand, and I looked back over my shoulder at my sleeping kingdom, and I understood that I was the king of a country that had been drinking, for 30 years, from a well it had buried a living woman at the bottom of, and they had cut the name of the man who buried her into a stone in the market square, and thanked him for their safety. He's dead, I said. Halloran, he's been dead 11 years. I stood at his stone as a young captain and I bowed my head to it. I know, she said. I felt him die. Her hand pressed mine. Do you know what I hoped, the day I felt the pattern of the drawing change and knew the hand that built it had gone? I hoped it would break. I stood right here and I put my hand where your hand is and I waited for the light to fail, because surely, the thing only held because he held it and it didn't fail. It didn't even flicker, because he'd built it too well. He built a cistern that would draw and hold and give back a drop at a time whether or not any hand tended it forever off of me, until there was no more light in me to take. The steel in her voice thinned. That was 11 years ago. I stopped hoping men would break it. I started counting how much of me was left. How much is left? I said. It was not a question I had any right to ask. I asked it because I could not ask it. She was quiet for a moment. Around us the gold light held, warm, steady, fed by the 2 hands pressed at its heart, and I realized with a lurch that this was the difference. This was why the ward had warmed for me and no other. For 30 years the dome had only ever taken, drawn out, drew off, drank down, and a thing built only to take does not know what to do when something finally presses back and gives. My hand against the light was giving. My blood, answering hers, was the first thing in 30 years to flow the wrong way through the ward, toward the well instead of away from it. And the ward, confused, warmed and thinned, and let her be seen. Enough, she said finally, that if you press your hand there another hour I will get to see your face for another hour, and I have decided that is worth more than the counting. She smiled at me, and it was the bravest thing I have ever seen a living soul do. So please don't take your hand away yet, Vale. Whatever else you do, not yet. I did not take my hand away. I stood on the last ice of the lake with the cold water steaming around the island and the gold light warm between our palms, and I made her 3 promises, in the order they came to me, which is the order a man makes promises when he has stopped being a king for a moment, and is only a man whose whole self has just recognized the one it was made for. I am not taking my hand away, I said. That's the first thing. Whatever it costs me, I will stand here on this ice until I fall through it before I take my hand from this glass and leave you alone in the dark again. Vale. The second thing, my voice was steadier than I had any right to expect. I am going to break this. I don't know how yet. Better men than me have burned it and hammered it and chanted at it, and I heard you say it, and I don't care. They were pushing on a door built to keep them out, but I'm not out, Nurys. Whatever I am to you, and I think we both felt what I am. I'm the one thing this ward was never built to keep away, and I am going to find the seam of that, and I am going to open it, and you are going to walk out of there on your own 2 feet, into the air, under the real moon, and never give 1 drop of yourself to anyone who hasn't earned it again. She was weeping now, openly, her hand shaking against mine, and she did not try to stop it, and I loved her for that too. And the third thing, I said, when you're out and you will be out, you owe this kingdom nothing. Do you hear me? Not 1 light, not 1 ward, not 1 warm spring. Every debt runs the other way now. Silvareth owes you, every soul in it, and they are going to learn your name and learn what the stone in the square really means. And if you never sing another drop of light as long as you live, this country will spend the rest of its days trying to deserve you anyway. That's not a king's promise. A king's promises are cheap, and I've made 100 of them. That's mine. Vale's, to Nurys, on the ice in the dark with my hand on the glass. For a long moment she could not speak at all. The gold light breathed around our hands. Far out over the lake, a single owl called and went silent, and the black water steamed, and 30 years of a lie stood between us, as thin now as a skin of fogged glass clearing under a warm breath. You should know something, she said at last thickly, before you decide to ruin your whole reign for a woman in a dome you met an hour ago. She wiped her face with her free hand and looked at me with the moon-on-water eyes, and I braced, because I had already learned that she warned a man before she wounded him. I felt it too. What you are. The moment your hand pressed back and my blood answered yours, I knew, the way you knew. I've known for 30 years that somewhere out there was a wolf my whole self was made to answer, and I made my peace, a long time ago, with the fact that I would die in here without ever meeting him, drawing wards for a country that thought I was a curse. Her voice broke and steadied. And then a man walked out onto the ice tonight and put his hand where 100 hands had gone before, and mine answered his, and the light warmed. So don't you dare tell me you don't know how to break this, Vale. You already know. You've known since you were a boy who came to the shore and felt less alone. You're the seam. You always were. The only thing that was ever going to open this dome is the one thing it was built to keep out, and he's standing on the ice with his hand on the glass, and he just promised me the moon. The gold ran brighter where our hands met. Behind my ribs the root that had taken hold pulled a 3rd time, and this time it did not let go. I stood on the ice a long time after that, and I did not take my hand away, and I made myself think. Because a promise is easy to make on a cold shore and a great deal harder to keep, and Nurys had earned better from me than a man who wept on the glass and then went home for a headache. You're the seam, she had said. The only thing that was ever going to open this dome is the one thing it was built to keep out. I turned it over. Halloran had built a cistern, a thing that drew light out of Nurys and gave it back to the country a drop at a time. A machine of taking. Every wolf who had ever struck at it had struck the way you strike an enemy wall. Fire, hammer, force, pushing in. And the ward had held, because a wall built to hold back an army is very good at holding back an army. But I had not pushed in. The first night my hand went quiet against the glass, I had not been attacking. I understood it now. Standing there, I had been offering. Some part of me, the part my wolf owned, had stood at that glass and given, the way a man gives without deciding to, the way you turn toward the one you love in your sleep. And a machine built only to take does not know the shape of a thing that gives. My blood had flowed the wrong way through the ward, toward the well, and the ward had warmed and thinned because in 30 years nothing had ever come toward Nuri's before. Only away. Nuri's, I said. The dome takes light. It's been taking yours for 30 years. It doesn't know what to do with light coming in, that's why it warmed. That's why it thinned. My hand isn't breaking your wall. My hand is filling your well. She went very still against the glass. I don't have moonlight in me, I said, thinking aloud, fast now. I'm no Moonair, I'm a plain gray wolf who got good at treaties. But I have Nuri's, I have me. I have whatever it is that answered you tonight, whatever it is a fated wolf pours toward his mate without being taught. And Halloran built a thing to hold a fixed amount of light and no more. A cistern only holds so much. If I stand here and pour everything I am at that glass, if I stop asking it to break and just give until it can't hold another drop, it overflows, she breathed. I saw her understand it in the same instant, saw 30 years of hope she'd buried claw its way back up into her face. A cistern that's already full and you keep pouring veil, it breaks from the inside. It breaks the way ice breaks when the water under it swells, not the way a wall breaks when you hit it. He built it to withstand every blow from outside the world could throw. He never once, in all his cleverness, built it to withstand being loved too full to hold. Because he couldn't imagine it, I said. He built a machine for taking. It never occurred to him a thing might come to the glass and give. Then give, she said, and pressed both her hands to mine through the light. Give veil. I've been the well at the bottom of this dark for 30 years. Fill me up until it breaks. I will not pretend I knew how. There is no lesson for it, no captain to teach it, no old text in a hall. I did the only thing I knew, which was to stop holding myself back. All my life I had been a careful man. A king learns to meter himself, to give the council a measured word and the enemy a measured mercy, and never ever the whole of what he feels, because a king who spends himself all at once has nothing left for the next crisis. And in Silvareth there was always a next crisis. I had metered myself for 38 years. I had metered myself at my father's grave. I had never once in my life poured out the whole of what I was, because I had never had anywhere safe to pour it. I had somewhere now. I put both hands to the glass, and I stopped metering and I gave. I gave her the boy on the shore who felt less alone. I gave her the nights I had come alone because I could not have borne to be watched wanting this. I gave her the root behind my ribs and the low settling certainty of my wolf and the 38 years of a careful king's hoarded, unspent self, all of it at once, toward the glass and the woman behind it, not asking, not striking, only pouring, the way the moon pours on black water because it does not know how to do anything else. The gold ring around our hands did not spread this time. It deepened. It went from gold to a white with no color left in it, the white at the very heart of a flame, and I felt the ward drink it, greedily at first, the old habit of 30 years taking, and then I felt the moment it could not take any more. I felt the cistern reach its brim. I felt the light I was pouring stop going into the machine and start backing up against it, swelling, the way water swells under ice that has stopped being able to hold it, and Nuri's threw back her head, and the moon-on-water eyes were full of tears and full of light, and she began to sing. I had never heard it, no living wolf of my time had. She opened her mouth and the light came out of her the way she had told me it would, not fire, not witch flame, but the true moonlight, the kind that falls on cold water and makes it bearable to be alive, and it met the light I was pouring in, and the two met inside the machine that had been built to keep them apart, and the dome could not hold them. Stand back! I did not shout it at her. I shouted it at the shore, at the far dark path, at a kingdom that did not yet know what was coming, a king's last reflex to warn his people. And then I turned back to the glass to her and I said the only thing left to say, "Come out, Nuries. Whatever this is, come out of there and be free of it. Come home." The dome shattered. I have heard it described 100 ways since, by every soul in Silvareth who woke that night to a light on the lake, and no two tellings agree, and I think that is right, because it was not one thing. To me, on the ice, with my hands on the glass, it was this. The great hill of frozen light did not explode outward and it did not fall inward. It unfroze. 30 years of held, hoarded, stolen light, 30 years of a woman's stolen self, all of it swelling past what the machine could hold. And then the machine simply ceased to be a machine and became what it had always secretly been, which was a very great deal of moonlight, wanting to go home. It broke like river ice breaks in the first true thaw. A long groaning crack, and then a sound like 100 bells, and then the whole shining structure came apart not into shards but into falling light, a rain of it, a snow of it, pouring up and out and over the black lake, and where it fell on the water shone, and where it fell on the far frozen shallows the ice lit from within, and where it fell across the sleeping country I could see, even from the island, the old dark stone circles around the distant villages catch and glow, one after another. Waking, as the light that had been stolen from them came flooding back all at once freely, the way it was always meant to come. And in the center of it, on the bare island where the dome had stood, with the false light falling away from her like water off a swimmer surfacing, stood Nuries on her own 2 feet, in the open air under the real moon, for the first time in 30 years. I crossed the last of the water without knowing how. I think the light held me. I think, honestly, I would have crossed it if it hadn't. I came onto the island and she was standing there swaying, blinking up at a sky with no glass between her and it, her hands open at her sides as if she did not quite believe they were free to move that far. And she was so much smaller in the open air, and so much more real. And I stopped an arm's length from her, because after 30 years of glass, I could not be the one to decide when she was touched. "You're out," I said stupidly. "Nuries, you're out." She looked at me. She looked at the sky. She looked at the far shore where the village lights were glowing awake, at the great warm flood of returned moonlight racing away across the country toward every dark stone circle that had been starving for it. And I watched her understand that it was hers, that it had always been hers, that 30 years of it was pouring home in a single night. "The air moves," she whispered. She lifted one hand into the night breeze off the lake and watched it stir her sleeve, and she said it again, wondering, like the truest miracle of the whole night, "Veil. The air moves." And then her legs went. 30 years of standing finally spent all at once, and I caught her. I was allowed now. I had waited to be allowed, and now I was. And she came into my arms light as the light itself. And I stood on the bare island in the falling moon rain and held my fated mate against my chest for the first time. And neither of us said anything at all for a long while, because there are things too large for a country's words. Halloran's regency died that night, though it took the daylight for anyone but me to understand it. I felt it go the moment the dome broke, felt the whole rotten architecture of it shudder and fail all at once, like a dam giving. For 30 years every ward in Silvareth had run on Nuries' stolen light, metered out drop by drop through the machine in his name so that the country thanked a dead man for its safety. When the machine broke and the light went home, that whole false economy collapsed. And this is the thing I want understood, the thing that mattered, the wards did not go dark. That was the truth Halloran had hidden, the truth that damned him. The light had never needed his machine. It had only ever needed Nuries, giving freely. And the moment she was free and gave freely, every stone circle in the country lit brighter than it had shone in 30 years, because now the full flood came home instead of the drip Halloran had allowed. Winter beasts, they told me later, fled the boundaries that very night all at once, across the whole of the lake country, as if the dark had been pulled up like a blanket. Warm springs the elders had thought long dwindling ran hot again by dawn. The boundary lights between the 6 packs, the honest lights, the ones that let 6 old enemies share one lake, because no one could cross them in the dark and lie about it. Blazed so bright the border villages thought the moon had come down to sit on the water. I had spent my whole reign stitching those 6 packs together, and telling myself I had done it. I stood on that island holding Nuri's and understood I had stitched a wound that she had been keeping from bleeding out the entire time, from the bottom of a well, unthanked, uncounted, alone. It should have shamed me past bearing. It would have if she had let it. "Stop," she murmured against my chest, feeling it in me she always could. "I can feel you doing it, deciding it was all a lie, that you built nothing, that you're a fraud who ruled on my back. Stop, look at me." She pulled back enough to make me. "You united 6 packs of wolves who'd been killing each other for 100 years, Vale. I kept the boundary lights honest. I could not have made those wolves trust the honest lights. I could not have made proud old alphas sit at one table and keep their word. That was you. That was your hands, your patience, your years. We built it together and neither of us knew the other was building." Her mouth curved, tired and true. "The light and the man. That's how it was always supposed to work in the old moonline, you know. The light and the wolf, the queen and the king, each doing the half the other couldn't. Halloran broke that apart and hoarded the light half and let a string of good tired kings do the wolf half in the dark, never knowing. Tonight it's whole again." She touched my face, wondering at being allowed to. "Don't you dare grieve on the one night it's finally whole." So I did not grieve. I have kept that too among the promises. On the one night it was finally whole, I did not grieve. I held her, and I watched the light go home across my country, and when she had strength enough to stand I did not carry her to the shore, though I ached too. I offered her my arm, and I let her walk out on her own 2 feet, across the newly shining ice, because 30 years of being carried against her will by a machine was enough, and the first steps she took back into the world were going to be hers. The kingdom woke to a queen. It had been raised to fear. I will be honest about how it went, because a lie about the morning would dishonor the truth of the night. It did not go easily at first. You cannot tell a country that has thanked a man on a market stone for 30 years that the stone is a gravestone for the woman it buried, and have them love her by breakfast. There were elders who had built their whole standing on being the ones who knew Halloran's mercy best, and they did not want the truth, and they fought it. There was a full council hall the next dawn where I stood Nuri's before the 6 packs and their alphas and told them plainly what their peace had cost and who had paid it. And I watched proud old wolves go gray in the face, and I watched 2 of them refuse to believe me, until Nuri's, without a word, without a boast, simply lifted her hand toward the great cold hearth at the hall's end, the one that had gone to embers in the night, and sang 3 notes, and filled the whole hall with warm moonlight, gently. Giving the way she had always given, and every wolf in that room felt on their own skin the thing they had spent 30 years thanking a dead man for. The hall went silent, and then the oldest alpha there, Torvald of the North Hold, a grim old wolf who had fought my father and hated the treaties and me, got up out of his seat, this ancient scarred creature who had never bowed to anything in his long life, and he crossed that silent hall to where Nuri stood, and he went down on one knee in front of her, and he could not speak for a moment, and when he did his voice cracked like a boy's. "We put a stone in the square," Torvald said, "and thanked the man who did this to you. 30 winters my grandchildren have walked safe between the villages because of you, and I thanked him. I do not know how a country begs a woman's pardon for a thing like that. But I am 80 years old, and I have knelt to no one since I was a pup, and I am kneeling now, and I will not get up until you tell me you have heard me ask." And the whole hall, 6 packs, every proud alpha, the elders who had fought the truth an hour before, the whole hall came down off its benches and knelt, not because I commanded it, I commanded nothing, but because they had felt the warm light on their own skin and known at last whose it was. And there is no wolf so proud he cannot kneel to the one who kept his grandchildren safe from the dark for 30 years and asked for nothing. Nuri stood in the middle of that kneeling hall, small and gray-gowned and unbroken, and she did not gloat, and she did not weep, and she did not do a single one of the things a lesser soul might have earned the right to do. She reached down and took old Torvald's scarred hand and drew him up to his feet, because she would not have him kneel, and she said, so that the whole hall heard it. "I heard you, get up, all of you get up." She waited until they had. "I was sealed in the dark by one man's greed. I will not be lifted out of it by a whole country's guilt. I don't want the square recarved with my name over his. I don't want 30 years of thank yous turned around to point at me." Her chin lifted, the moon-on-water eyes steady on them all. "I want what I wanted when I was 18 years old and gave the light freely because I loved doing it. I want to keep this country warm, freely, on my terms, beside a king who knows now what it costs and will never, ever take it for granted." She looked at me then across the hall, and the whole of it turned to look with her. "That's all. That's the only reparation I'll take. Let me keep you warm because I choose to, not because a machine wrings it out of me. And spend your kneeling on making sure no clever man ever builds a well to hold a person at the bottom of again." That was the morning Silvareth stopped being a country that ruled on a hidden woman and became a country that had a queen. Not because I put a crown on her, I did that later, and I will tell it, but because she stood in a kneeling hall with every reason in the world to take her revenge, and chose instead to keep us warm. I crowned her at the next full moon, on the shore of the Black Lake, on the exact tongue of ice where I had first pressed my hand to the glass. She chose the place. I would have done it in the great hall, in the gold and the velvet, with the 6 packs in their finery a king thinks in halls, but Nurys shook her head. "The shore," she said, "where you first press back. I want to be crowned standing on the ground where somebody finally saw me." So we did it on the shore, under the true moon, with the whole of Silvareth spread up the hill behind us and the black water shining at our feet. And I want to tell you exactly what I did, because I made a promise on that ice a month before, and a crowning is where a king keeps his promises in front of his people. I did not put the crown on her head first. I took off my own cloak, the gray fur mantle that is the mark of the Alpha King of Silvareth, the one my father wore and his father before him, and I laid it around her shoulders with my own hands, out there in the cold, because the plain gray gown she had stood in for 30 years was the truest gown any queen of the Lake Country ever wore, and I would not have her change it, but I would not have her cold either, ever again. And then I did the thing that made the old Alphas murmur, the thing no king of Silvareth had ever done. I knelt. I knelt on the ice in front of my whole kingdom, to the woman I was about to crown, and I took her hand. "I am the Alpha King of Silvareth," I said, loud enough for the shore, "and I have united 6 packs, and I have kept the peace, and I have done every hard and honest thing a king is meant to do, and I did it all standing on your light, and I never knew, and I will carry that as long as I live. So I will not stand over you and set a crown on your head like a gift from a great man to a lucky woman. I know what you are worth. I have known since my hand pressed the glass and yours pressed back. You do not become a queen tonight, Nurys. You have been the queen of this country from the bottom of a well for 30 years, keeping it warm in the dark, and tonight I am only the first king honest enough to say so on my knees." I lifted the Moonline's own crown, recovered from Halloran's vaults where he'd hidden it, the true crown of the light, and I held it up to her from where I knelt. "Take your crown. It was always yours. I'm only glad I lived to hand it back." She took it. She did not let me crown her. She took the crown from my hands and set it on her own head herself, which was exactly right, which was the most Nurys thing she could possibly have done, and the shore of Silvareth roared. And then she reached down and drew me up off the ice the way she had drawn old Torvald up, because she would not have me kneel either, not for long, and she held my face in both her freed hands under the real moon, and she said, only to me, under the roar. 30 years I stood at that glass and watched the shore and made my peace with dying in the dark. Do you know what I never once let myself imagine in all that time, because it was the one thing that would have broken me? Her thumb moved over my cheek. Not rescue. I could imagine rescue, some hero, some fire, some army. I made my peace with hoping for that and never getting it. The thing I never let myself imagine was that whoever finally reached me would stay. that he wouldn't break the glass and ride off into the story as the man who freed the moon-cursed girl, that he would break it and then just stand there, on the ice, and ask my name, and still be standing there a month later putting his cloak on my shoulders. Her eyes shone. You didn't rescue me, Vale. Lots of men tried to rescue me. You stayed. That's the thing no dome was ever built to survive. We had a long reign, she and I, and a good one, and it does not belong in this telling. A life together is not a single night on the ice, and the parts of it I treasure most are the small ones no country ever saw. But I will end where a man should end, which is with the thing I do differently now, because that is how you know a king's heart truly changed and did not just have one good night. There is no market stone anymore with a dead man's name cut into it, thanking him for our safety. I had it taken up. I did not replace it with Nuri's name because she forbade it, and I keep my promises to her. In the empty place where it stood, I had them lay a plain ring of the old moonline stone, the kind the wards run through, and every full moon Nuri's walks down to it and sings a little of the light into it, freely, on her own terms, the way she wanted at 18, and the whole square glows for a night, and there is no name on it at all, because the light was never one person's to be thanked for. It was hers to give and ours to be worthy of, and a country that carves a savior's name into a stone has already started building the next dome without knowing it. That is what I do differently. I built a reign once on a woman I could not see. Now I rule a country that has learned to see the one who keeps it warm and to say thank you to her face and to build no wells. She is asleep as I write the end of this, under the gray fur cloak, in the warm hall, with the boundary lights honest and bright across the whole lake country, and not one soul in the dark tonight who does not choose to be. 30 years the world couldn't crack that dome with fire and hammer and 9 nights of chanting. In the end, it took one plain gray wolf who came to the shore because he felt less alone, and pressed his hand to the cold, and gave instead of took. And when the light broke and the whole shining structure came apart into moonlight going home, did the one thing no cage was ever built to survive. He stayed.